The residential school was actually run by the church, by Reverend Fathers. If they caught you speaking English, they would beat the shit out of you until you died. About 150,000 indigenous children were placed in these residential schools. More than 30,000 children died. Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Nikki, aka Ada Canada. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Please endeavor to subscribe. If you've watched like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos and you haven't yet subscribed, I'm judging you. So you guys know lately I've been making a lot of school related content. I did have another school related content that I was supposed to upload this week, but I decided to upload it next week or whenever I'm done editing that video and put this video out instead for this week. So today is the 30th of September and this is the national day that Canada has set aside for the truth and reconciliation, and I'm going to be talking about that very soon. But the main agenda for today is I'm going to be giving you reasons why I love Canada, why I appreciate Canada, why I've been here ever since for the past 6 years. No leave, no transfer. Anyway, so the first reason why I love Canada is that I appreciate the fact that Canadians who are non-indigenous recognize that this land, I'm talking about every drop of soil on this land that is Canada, belongs to the indigenous people of Canada. Now when I say indigenous people, I mean First Nations, Inuit and Métis, because those are the indigenous people of Canada. So many of you might not really know this history, but Canada has a very sordid history with the European settlers and, you know, the indigenous people of Canada. There's been a lot of abominable and unthinkable things that have happened in the past. Many of you might not really know this, so I'm going to try and summarize this very long history as briefly as possible. So back then, the 1400s, 1500s, and even before then, this land, this entire place that is Canada, was occupied by the indigenous people of Canada, and they were living their lives. They were minding their business. They were just doing their own thing, living in their own bubble, doing their own religious practices. They were just in their own world, minding their business. They weren't troubling anyone. They were basically living free. They did a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, a lot of farming, and just things were just going well for them. It was a very peaceful community of indigenous people. And so around the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, the first European settlers came from the United Kingdom and from France. And so when they came in here, they saw that you know, the land is green, it's fertile, it's rich. They saw what the indigenous people were enjoying and they wanted to also take part in that enjoyment. And so they decided to start exploiting the land. They started engaging in some kind of trade between Canada and Europe. Hides, which is like the skins of wild animals, was a thing back then. It was something that really boosted the economy. And so the Europeans, they started exporting the hides, the skins of animals to Europe. In exchange, the European settlers would also bring things from their country into Canada. And so that's how business started going. From exploiting the land, they moved on and they started exploiting the indigenous people. More and more people came from Europe, and the colonizers also came as well, and they started using the indigenous people to fight their wars. They started using the indigenous people to make war materials like the swords, the shields, the spears, and every other armor that was needed to fight a war. They were using the indigenous people to make them. They were also using the indigenous people to fight their wars. As if that was not enough, they still wanted more, and so they started exploiting the land. Basically, they started taking the land away from the indigenous people by sending them to up north, to those areas where it's not fertile. You know, there's basically nothing. The land is just barren. They sent them up north to places that are now called reservations, where there isn't even a good road network, so you're basically just in the middle of nowhere. No means of transportation. There's no food, so there's famine, and even the water there is questionable. You don't even know what you're drinking. And so there was incidents of cholera and other forms of communicable diseases that, you know, started coming up. The indigenous people started suffering a lot of communicable diseases. There was nothing like vaccines then. Smallpox was very rampant, you know, no vaccines, no nothing, no medicine. Many of them died to that effect. As if exploiting the land and taking the land away from the indigenous people was not enough. They wanted to make the indigenous people assimilate the European culture. So they wanted them to speak English, because the indigenous people of Canada didn't speak English. They wanted them to go to school and become educated like the Europeans. They wanted them to go to church and practice Christianity, because the indigenous people are not Christians. They have their own religious practices. They have their own culture. So they basically wanted the indigenous people to abandon their culture and then take up the European culture. And that's exactly what they started doing. Right around 1876, after the Indian Act was enacted, they brought up this residential school system. And residential school is just a network of boarding schools where children, indigenous children between the ages of 4 and 16 years, were taken away from their homes and their families and placed into these boarding schools in a bid to make them assimilate the European culture and make them speak English and make them become educated and also Christian. The residential school was actually run by the church, by Reverend Fathers. The residential school system started right around 1876 under the then Prime Minister Alexander Mackenzie, and then by 1894 under the Prime Minister Mackenzie Bowell, they made residential schools mandatory for indigenous children. Between 1894 and 1997, indigenous children were in indigenous schools. They were going to those schools, and it was a lifetime of torture. We are talking about kids that were forcefully taken away from their parents, from their families, from their homes, from their ancestry, and dumped into a classroom filled with students. There was a lot of overcrowding, and many children died from overcrowding, from tuberculosis and other communicable diseases that are brought about by overcrowding. These kids were tortured in the sense that they weren't allowed to speak their native languages, because they wanted them to be able to speak English, so they weren't allowed to speak their native languages. And so, like, they basically lost their ancestral heritage. They lost their identity. If they caught you speaking English, they would beat the shit out of you until you died. Many of them were sexually abused, physically abused, psychologically abused, emotionally abused, even verbally abused. And it was just a lifetime of torture. A lot of them were buried alive. Recently, we've heard stories of how graves of hundreds of children have been found. And these are children that never got a chance to see their parents. Their parents never even got a chance to see them, but these kids were buried. This whole strife and torture went on for years and years and years. About 150,000 indigenous children were placed in these residential schools. More than 30,000 children died. There are some of them that have survived. Some of them are still living to tell the story, but a lot of them died. It brought about a lifetime of intergenerational trauma. There's a lot of PTSD going on, diabetes, substance use and substance abuse that happened with these unfortunate victims. So it wasn't until 1997 that the last residential school was shut down for good. If you calculate from 1894 to 1997, that is a total of 103 years of strife, of torture, of crimes against humanity, crimes against mankind that were meted out on the indigenous people of Canada. And it took an extra 11 years from 1997 till 2008 for the Prime Minister at that time, Steve Harper, to issue out the first public apology on behalf of the Canadian government and the Canadian people for all the atrocities meted out against the indigenous people. One of the first steps in solving a crisis kind of thing like this is to acknowledge and take responsibility for your actions. And so I do appreciate the fact that Canada has assumed responsibility for their actions, especially the non-indigenous people. And so I also appreciate the fact that non-indigenous Canadians recognize that this land is not their land. This land was basically stolen by, you know, those European and colonizers. The government is now taking steps, and parastatals, various parastatals and firms and companies, they are now taking steps to ensure inclusion of indigenous people, because these people were basically segregated. The kind of trauma that these people went through, the victims, it's something that has been transferring from generation to generation to generation. So those people who were lucky to survive a residential school system, they will tell the story down to their children, and the children will tell the story down to the grandchildren. And so you have that generation that suffered from all of these atrocities. This present generation of indigenous people are still suffering from the atrocities, and even the future generation are still going to suffer the effects of everything that happened in the past. And so I appreciate the fact that at least they are taking steps. They recognize that this is all on them, the non-indigenous Canadians, and they are taking steps to provide inclusion and also basically recognize and acknowledge that this is what happened, and also pay respect. In 2008 also, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was enacted. About 7,000 statements were gathered from the victims, the surviving victims of the residential school system. In 2015, eventually the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is TRC, established the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And finally, officially, Canada has decided to make the 30th of September the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So this is the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and it's a day to look back and kind of reflect on everything that went down in history and how these unfortunate souls were treated back then. It's also a day to educate yourself and learn more about history of Canada and also the indigenous people. You can partake in events that the indigenous people are organizing. The color of the day is orange, so technically you're supposed to wear an orange shirt. Unfortunately, I don't have an orange shirt because I couldn't get one in time to be able to make this video. Technically, this is supposed to be a statutory public holiday, but they are yet to make it a statutory public holiday. However, it is a national day, and I do hope that they will eventually make it a statutory holiday. The second reason why I love Canada is I love and appreciate the stability that you get with basic amenities. Coming from a country like Nigeria, some of these basic amenities that you get constantly is not the case. It's intermittent and it's epileptic. For example, the power supply. And so I do appreciate that constant 24/7 power supply. I like and I appreciate the fact that these things are the basic necessities of life that everybody should have access to. It should be constant and it should be available for everybody. It shouldn't be intermittent. Ever since I came here, I've only experienced power outage twice in my life, and that was because the power company was working on something, and that's why the light went out. The first time they took the light for 15 minutes, the second time they took the light for 1 hour, and that's because they were working on it. Like, there was actually a legitimate reason that the power went out, because something happened and they had to work on it to restore power. I actually appreciate also like the response with which they get down to things. If power is out, they are working on how they can restore power. If water is out, there's a reason why the water is out, and they'll work on restoring water supply. As basic as these amenities are, we are entitled to receive these amenities. It shouldn't be something that we have to fight for or we have to beg for or something like that. The third reason why I love Canada is I like the fact that immigration is friendly and immigration is available for all. There is a lot of diversity here. People from all walks of life and all countries have been able to immigrate. This country has a lot of immigrants, and immigration is really contributing a lot to the economy of Canada. I also like the fact that there are multiple streams of immigration. So you can come in through school, you can come in as a PR via the express entry, federal skilled workers, federal skilled trades. You can come in through the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program. So there are so many ways that you can migrate to Canada as an individual or as a family, make a life for yourself, or like build a career for yourself and for your family. I also like the fact that you don't have to marry anybody on a contract marriage in order to become a Canadian citizen. Contract marriages are frowned upon because it's usually an avenue to commit immigration fraud. There are just so many options out there that contract marriage should be the last, and it shouldn't even be on the list in the first place. The next reason why I love Canada is I like the fact that this country is relatively quiet in some certain contexts. For example, 2 weeks ago or last week, we just had federal elections on the 20th of September, and people voted, but you wouldn't really know that anything's happening. I literally walked out and there was no violence going on, there was no shooting going on. Again, I'm coming from a place like Nigeria, and in Nigeria elections are never quiet. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of drama, a lot of things going on when it comes down to elections, but right here it was relatively quiet. You basically had to vote online as long as you are a registered voter. There's no noisy campaign. You don't see a bunch of people doing a campaign, marching in the middle of the road with their cars and causing a lot of traffic in the name of campaigning for elections. There were candidates that were campaigning, but they just weren't causing a nuisance or causing a stop or traffic jam where other people can't even get to where they are going. I like the fact that it's relatively quiet in some certain contexts. I believe that even though elections are going, it shouldn't disrupt the normal process of things, and that's what I like. Even census, for example, census is relatively quiet. Census is mandatory, but you don't see like so much drama going on just because of census. I come from a country where we are very dramatic, so it was really a very big change, but it wasn't one where you couldn't just adjust to the quiet way of doing things here. The next reason why I love Canada is the fact that you as an individual are free to become anything you want to become, and I say this with respect to careers and education. You can do anything you want to do. You can be anything you want to be. If, for example, you went to school or you're going to school and you're studying engineering, if you wake up one day and you feel like engineering is not for you and you want to switch to something else, you can definitely switch. You can even switch in the middle of programs. You can change careers. You can be anything you want to be. In Canada, the sky is big enough for everybody to fit in and conquer and prosper. Nobody is holding you back. Nothing is really stopping or hindering your progress. There are so many opportunities for growth as well. The next reason why I love Canada is the tourism aspect of Canada. This place is so beautiful. This place called Canada is so beautiful. It has a lot of touristy places. There are a lot of parks. There are a lot of places to go and visit. For example, Niagara Falls. I love Niagara Falls. It is so majestic, guys. Niagara Falls is on my bucket list in Canada, and I do hope that very soon I'll be able to visit Niagara Falls, but it is one place that I love to visit. There are places like Tobermory Island in Ontario. There's Cape Breton in Nova Scotia. There's Vancouver. There's Banff and Jasper. When you go out there outside of your comfort zone and try to explore nature and try to like visit all these places, it makes you appreciate Canada. It makes you appreciate this land. You see the beauty that is in Canada when you step outside of your comfort zone. The mountains are very beautiful, very majestic. The falls, the nature is also like, honestly, words aren't really doing justice to all these things I'm saying. You really need to go see for yourself for you to understand what I'm saying and for you to really appreciate it. The next reason why I love Canada is the travel opportunities. So as a Canadian citizen, you can visit as many as 170 or is it 180 countries visa free. You don't need a visa to visit those countries. It tells you how strong the Canadian passport is. Personally, I like traveling a lot and I like visiting new places. I like learning about new cultures and new ways of doing things. Like I love traveling so much, and I have a bucket list of countries to travel to. You just get to go out there and see the world for what it is. You get to go out there and learn about other places and just appreciate the beauty, all the beauty that is in this world and is available to explore. Alright guys, so I believe that is all for today's video. I hope that you liked this video and I hope you're able to learn something from this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did like this video. Subscribe to my channel, guys. Come on, let's be friends. Subscribe to my channel, share this video with other people you know or you think are interested in Canada. Don't forget to turn on my post notifications so that you'll never miss uploads like this, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Until then, stay safe. Bye guys.